back just a little bit.
Torgny Vigerstadt. He was here at camp, and George and I were married. In June and August, we came to camp, and Torgny, he wanted to give us a wedding present, badly. So he watched things that came from the sales table as they were auctioned off. And bless his heart, for $1, he did a waffle iron, a round waffle iron with a beautiful patented underneath that we use to make our waffles this day. Today, it's been rewired. The top wiring has gave way, but it's been rewired, and we use it often and think of Torgy. We got in touch with him. We tell him how we love our waffle iron, and we've been married 59 years, and that we still remember him. The other memory I have is not of Torgny was involved in it, but it was an older flame that down in the river found a snapping turtle. He was, and I'm not exaggerating, he was this big. And if you know, I knew that snapping turtles have a very long neck, longer than you think. And it's really long, much longer than you think of most turtles. So he's holding this snapping turtle, and we're taking pictures of it, and I am scared. I am really frightened. But there we have pictures of that snapping turtle up by the cook's kitchen. And we had a song too. You can get anything you want at Mary's Restaurant. Walk right in and around the back, right across from the railroad track. You can get anything you want at Mary's Restaurant.
For those who don't know, Mary Valadares was the cook here at camp for a really long time. And as long as we're sharing Vigerstadt stories, Alice Vigerstadt, for those of you who didn't know her, was a crazy, nutty, wonderful person. I doted on her as a young child, and she doted on me right back. And when I was lifeguard, she scared me out of my mind. We didn't have that nice railing down there. She would crawl across the catwalk to get to the raft. And she's like in her 60s. She's crawling across the raft. And all she had to do was like roll over, and she'd be downstream in a minute. And one day she comes up to me and says, "Do you think you could take us old ladies for a canoe trip? We'll be good." And that's how the old lady canoe trip got started. So, anybody else have a story to share? Song? Ben?
I just have a joke that I've told way too many times. Why did chewing gum cross the road?
I don't know why.
Because it was stuck to the chicken.
All right. All right, next story. Stories. Something to share.
Way too many times.
Okay. There you go. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. First, I'll give you a very short one, and then the long one. The short one is from Fred Rogers. If you know it, sing along. Peace and quiet, peace, peace, peace. Peace and quiet, peace, peace, peace. Peace and quiet, peace, peace, peace. We all want peace. We all want peace. And that's by Fred Rogers. And the next one was taught to me by some friends who would go to Ireland every few years. I don't know if I sang it the other night if you came to Cup Crankies activity. They would go and collect songs, and they would bring back stories and songs from Ireland. And if you've ever read or heard about any of the stories of the fairy folk, they can be quite the mischief makers. You don't really want to mess with them, but this is sort of a sweet story about them. Can you hear this okay? It's called Donald Hunchback. One night in the black, poor Donald Hunchback, his cart from the glenside was bringing, when he heard the sweet sound of the fairies around, and this is the song they were singing. Juluin, Jamarch, Juluin, Jamarch, Juluin, Jamarch. And then they stopped. And then they would start again. Juluin, Jamarch, Juluin, Jamarch, Juluin, Jamarch. And they stopped. Now Donald Hunchback stopped in his tracks at the sound of their voices blending, for the music was sweet, but it was quite incomplete, for they could not remember the ending. They only sang Juluin, Jamarch, Juluin, Jamarch, Juluin, Jamarch, and then they would stop. So what I understand is that it's the fairy law that you have to finish the song all the way to the end or you can't stop dancing. And these magical fairies might have been dancing for 50 years or more. And one of them maybe had to go to the bathroom. And maybe Donald had to go to the bathroom. So now Donald was shy, but he could never stand by and leave their frustrations unheeded. So he stifled his fear, and he sang soft and clear, and gave them the ending they needed. Juluin, Jamarch, Juluin, Jamarch, Juluin, Jamarch, Agus Cadine, and the fairies were glad, so grateful he had known the end of the song they were voicing, and the magical fairies took away his hunchback and sent Donald homeward rejoicing. Juluin, Jamarch, Juluin, Jamarch, Juluin, Jamarch, Agus Cadine. Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
All right, anybody have a camp story to share? Nancy, come on up. Come on.
I'm really happy to see some of my Flames cohort here this evening because the story I'm going to tell, some of you may remember. So there was this time when we all piled into the old checker cab, the tank, and we went to the Bridgeton Drive-In. You were going to tell me? Okay, good. I don't know. So the Bridgeton Drive-In they would charge like by the carload, like $5 a carload. So we fit a lot of people in the checker cab. So there's it really literally was one of those old cabs from New York City, like 3 rows. So legally, I think it sat 9, but we squeezed in, I think 17. So in the tank, it was, we called it the tank, but it was an old checker cab. So I believe Trevor was driving, and we he pulled up to the cashier, whatever, and he's got like a $5 bill out to pay the guy, and he looks at us, he looks in, and he says, I don't think so. And he's like, I think I need to charge you $1 per person. And so we did pay $17, and then does any of you ever remember what movie we saw? Because I do. The Blues Brothers, yes. So maybe you have a different drive-in story. So then we parked, and then they all piled out, and Trevor and I sat in the front of the checker cab by ourselves and watched the movie. It was great. That's my story.
So yeah, I had a different story about the drive-in, which was, I believe, 1977 when Star Wars came out. We all piled in the checker cab and went, and we brought blankets, and we went out, and I've never forgotten that, just lying on the ground and watching this huge Star Wars. And I mean, it was such a new concept to see that movie and having it so big, and we were out under the sky and everything. So that was just my driving story. I love that. And another memory that I was just thinking of childhood memories, and one is that I wanted George and Lois, especially Lois, to remember is I had a frog that I made here with Lois, and when I came back, I think maybe I was 7 when I was last year as a child, and when I came back as a flame, I still remembered making that frog, and I had it for quite a long time. Maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, something happened to it. But I loved that frog. It was just, that reminded me of camp always. But, and I'll just tell a funny story about when I came back as an adult and grown up and was a dorm mom, and I was up in the dorm with the girls, and my nephew was here that year. He was 15, 14 maybe. And I went to bed, I think, probably before the girls did, but I guess I was completely sound asleep because I thought I heard something when I kind of rolled over and went back to sleep. And then I woke up in the morning, and I sort of turned away from the girls and started putting my bathing suit on. And I looked over and I thought, that's my nephew in that cot over there. And the girls had all snuck out, and the boys had all snuck into the dorm and were all lying in the girls' beds, and one of them was my nephew. They'd all done this all with the creaky stairs and everything, and I never woke up. Yeah, and the girls were apparently, but I couldn't believe they had done that, and I didn't wake up, so it was pretty funny. But that was one of my favorite memories.
All right, Bob.
I think I was in a slightly younger Flames cohort than the Star Wars crew, although I was around that year. And summer of '77. I was here at camp that year, and it was the last year before I and my whole family took 24 years off before we showed up again in 2001, and then have been here ever since. But that was the summer that we moved back from Asia to the United States after our family had lived for 11 years in the Far East. And I had finally, fallen in love that spring with a girl at Taipei American School, and I was absolutely heartbroken that I finally had connected with somebody, and my parents said, "Okay, we're leaving now." It's like, well, you can't do that to me. And that was a year when Dan Sullivan was here. I don't know if some of you will remember Dan Sullivan, and he was a really talented musician. He is a really talented musician, piano player, and he was in here a lot on that piano. And I don't know, I kind of stapled myself to him that summer. I remember that. And he knew that I was heartbroken and so forth, and he helped me compose a song about that was, that sort of spilled it all out. And I connected with him, I don't know, 5-6 years ago on Facebook. Not on Facebook anymore, but anyway, we had a brief exchange, and I said, "Do you remember back in the summer of '77?" And you'd be playing that piano a lot in the lecture hall, and oh yeah, I remember that. And I said, "Do you remember you helped me compose a song?" He says, "Oh, absolutely." And I can't remember whether it was immediately or if he took some time to do it, but a short time later, he sends me a link, and there he is performing the song. From beginning to end, he remembered all the lyrics, all the music, everything. And it absolutely blew my mind. And it just, you never know what's going to stick with a person. And, I didn't remember the whole thing. And it was for me, it was important to me at the time. So that was very touching. And it also just cemented my feeling about him as an incredibly talented musician. But, Dan Sullivan was a good guy. I miss him. And I think he's living in Wyoming, Montana, somewhere out there in the Badlands. Anyway.
All right, anybody else? George, come on up.
Memories. I have such great memories of this place. When I came here, I came as the youth director, and then I went to the assistant for the grounds, and then finally I was the head of the camp. And when I was the head of the camp, I had certain duties at night to make sure that all the young people were in their tents. And so I was making the rounds when I looked in the tent and there was one person missing. And what? Oh, okay. Then one year, we decided we would pull a trick, and in the girls' dorm, we went up to the door that led into we didn't go into their dorm, obviously, but Lois was with me, and we made a web, like a spider's web. And when they opened the door, we had it weighted so that a spider came down in the middle of that. It was a beauty. To the guys, I couldn't do a spider, but we went over in the quiet of the night and filled the bathroom with balloons. And if anybody needed to get into the bathroom, they had to somehow take care of all these balloons in order to get to the facilities. One year, I took some of their clothes and put them up on the flagpole. Lo and behold, I woke up the next morning and my car had been pushed up the hill here, and in it was filled all kinds of artifacts, one of which was a urinal in the front seat. And then Lois and I laughed, and we came back to our room, and next thing I know, we can't get out. And you know, back in those days, if you were late for breakfast, you had a song about stand up, stand up. Well, they put a wire all the way around our door that we could not get out. And then they waited until Lois and I were late enough, and then they came and undid it. But I'll tell you, the thing that sticks, kidding, and I think if Ross were here, one of the things I did when he was in bed was I had these little Band-Aids, and it said, outfoxed. And I went out while they were sleeping with the adhesive and put it on the forehead of every one of them. And most of them slept, except for Ross. And I can't repeat what he said when he woke up with the stitches thing going on, but huh?
We did it backwards so that when they woke up and looked in the mirror, it said outfox.
Okay. But he woke up and he said, "What the?" But the thing is, it solidified us. I think they would wait to see what I would do so that they would respond in like kind. And it has been in my heart and my mind for many, many years. It was fun outfoxing you all and you outfoxing the fox.
All right, that reminds me of a few things. Colgate, I'll call you in just a second. When I was in the little boys' tent, which is where the clotheslines are now, the big boys' tent and the little boys' tent would raid each other too, just like the fox and the flames raided each other. And one day, after we'd all gone to bed, the big boys came and dumped us all out of our beds into the ground outside the tent, and I didn't wake up. And my only memory of the whole event is lying on my back and 5 heads hovering over me. "You're sure you're okay? You're sure you're okay?" And they'd found me wrapped around a tent pole with blankets, clutching blankets. So this is 2 Steve Perry stories. Steve Perry slept like a log, and one day they picked up his whole bed when he was sleeping and carried him across the railroad tracks and set him down over there. And the train comes by at 6 o'clock every morning and honks its whistle when it crosses Haleytown Road over here, and he didn't wake up. He didn't wake up. And 3/4 of the way through breakfast, he comes over and says, "I missed half of breakfast." So the next night they carried his bed down to the waterfront, put it across 2 canoes, paddled him across, and left him on the beach. And he didn't wake up until first lecture. The bell rang for lectures. All right, Colgate.
This is the George McCurdy initiation to camp for me. So the first day I came to camp, I got here late. I was in Providence for a meeting. I had to take a bus to Cambridge. I had to find a car, and I got up here around 11:30. so the only people awake were Cecilia and George, and they welcomed me. And there was a soda cooler out there where the salad bar is, and in between the two little doors there, and they offered me a Coke, and we sat down, and we talked, and then they said, well, you're going out to the tent. So I'm led out to a tent, and it's out there, you know, where the treehouse is, where the boys' dorm used to be, and the flaps are all up. Nobody else is in the tent. There's probably 4 beds or 5 beds, and I just crash on one and go to sleep. And then I have this pretty powerful dream in the middle of the night. There's a train coming. And it's a pretty powerful dream, and I wake up, and shit, there's a light coming right at the damn tent. It's a big light. It's huge, and it's lighting everything. I said, this is initiation. They're going to kill me. So I gotta get up, and I run out of the tent, and the train goes by across the street. So that's how I was brought into camp, as sort of someone who they tried to kill the first night. And it took me 20 years to feel I was loved here after that.
Dan, come on up.
All right, so if we're going to talk about how we got to camp, I was all of 13 years old, and I was sick, and I did not make the car ride from New York City to Freiburg, Maine in 1977, for those of you playing the home version. And I had to come up 3 or 4 days later. And so my mother bought me a one-way bus ticket out of town. And I had to transfer buses in Boston. So I took the local bus from New York City up to Boston, then Boston to North Conway, New Hampshire. Of course, my mother always remembered going to North Conway, so she bought the ticket for North Conway. The people here at the assembly had agreed to pick me up. Now, my brother was already, he's 15, he's 2 years older than I am. He's already asleep in the tent at 11:30 at night when I finally arrived in North Conway. But the kind people that were here, and I don't remember who it was, that agreed to pick me up, were trying to pick me up in Conway. But because the bus was so late, the guy wouldn't let them get on to check to see if anybody was. So I got off the bus station in North Conway, and nobody's there at the age of 13. So we finally, make the collect call because, I had left my cell phone in 1977 in the future. So, you had to make a collect call mom. Mom calls the assembly. The people aren't back yet. She keeps going. So I didn't make it back to the tent till about 1 a.m., and I lie down, and my brother says, "Oh, don't kick him. He's my brother. I'll kick him later." And 1977, Bob. Where's Bob? Bob. So I remember vividly the canoe trip, because that's what I thought my initiation Colgate was, because the first outing day, we decided to go what's called Round River. And Dan Sullivan and Bob Perry were the older Flames that were on the canoe trip. And so we started out early because it was a long canoe trip. And I said, okay, I'm up for this, sure. I'm a scrappy little kid from New York City. What? River. Right. Okay. So we left at like 8:30 in the morning, and we were not heard from again because we left our cell phones in the future until about 9:30 at night, because we canoed up some drainage ditches because we missed the cutoff for Lovell's Pond, and Lee's dad and a couple of other people had to go out. George had to go look for us, and they were afraid we were going to go over the falls, not the Swans Falls, but the real falls in Hiram. And that would have been, deadly. So, that was my initiation to. Yeah. Oh, now we would have. Yeah, we would have. But we made it to a roadway, and we wandered up some road and found a house and called them, and they came and got us. And we're not happy, although we were alive. So that was it. And I vividly remember the river stones and the sand and the defox and the raids and tying hubcaps for people. That's when you could pull hubcaps off into the dining room. And as we were leaving, one fell, and it made a heck of a clash. And so I remember tying your cabin up. I wasn't doing much, but I do. That was a lot of fun. So thank you.
All right, anybody else have a story? Lois?
The young people were always checked in, and they, with the idea that they were safe and they're in, because some of the kids, many of the teenagers came without their parents. I came with my parents. And so years later, Walter Chapin was telling somebody a story about what happened at Freiburg. He said, we snuck out. We snuck out and we went down to a little shack, crab shack, in the town, and then we snuck back. And I didn't want to embarrass him, so I got him aside and I said, Walter, we never did that. You made that up. He says, oh no, we didn't. We really did do that. But you didn't do it because your parents were here, and it wouldn't have worked because they would have found out and they would have been really upset. So that's the story of Walter telling. Everything. That's right. I told my mother everything. Anyway, the other story is a story on George and George. Okay? George and George were in charge of the safety of the young people, and it was time for corn roast time. And so they were planning, the corn roast was planning, and there was rain. Now, we began to know, then there's rain up in the mountains. It's going to take maybe a day. How long, Dan, before it gets here? About a day. So we're worried because now they're going to do the corn roast in the river on an island. And, oh no, they're going to do the corn roast. So we tried to dissuade them, but they built a fire on a piece of plywood on an island in the river. And they're downstairs singing and having a wonderful time. And finally, Walter Orthwine walks to the edge, and he says, he puts a stick in where the water is lapping at the island. And then we sing a few more songs, and the next thing you know, he goes to the edge, and the stick is underwater. And he moves the stick here, and we sing another song, and he says, I think the island is disappearing. And oh no, that can't happen. So the island was disappearing. The next thing you know, we had young people swimming to the side of the river on both sides. The fire got lifted by the water, was floating down the river. And the young people were, one of them were crawling up one side of the mountain covered with poison ivy.
That was my first corn roast, by the way. Bob.
Two quick follow-ons. One is about the outing days gone wrong for Flames. And there was a famous one. I don't know, George, if you were a part of this one, but way back, a bunch of Flames. Maybe you weren't here when George Dole was a Flame, but when George Dole was a Flame, and Skip Perry was a Flame, and Jim Perry was a Flame, and John Perry was a Flame, and so forth, they went to climb Mount Katahdin. And I've heard them, one or more of them, tell this story in recent years. But basically, they didn't get back down until well after dark. And that did not go over very well with the parents. That was a pretty scary experience. But the Flames were fine. I mean, they all survived and so forth. But sometimes outing days don't go exactly as planned. And the other is a story that only indirectly relates or that originates at Freiburg, but it's a story about how parenting has changed over the years. So Dan, this is inspired by you talking about your journey from New York City up to Freiburg. Well, there was a time when Amy and I were here at Freiburg, and it was time to go home, but our parents weren't around. Home was Taipei. So how did we do that? Well, some adults drove us to the bus station in North Conway. We got on a bus. This is Amy and me. I'm in charge, and I'm 12. We get on a bus in North Conway. We take it to, I guess it was South Station in Boston. And then somehow we get from South Station to Logan Airport. I don't know if it was a subway or a bus or a taxi or what. But then we get on a plane at Logan that flies us to LAX, and then we change planes in LAX, and we get on a flight to Honolulu, and then we get on a flight, and then we change planes in Honolulu, and then it's Honolulu to Guam, and then it's Guam to Taipei, and one of our parents picks us up at the airport there. Who would do that these days? I mean, parents these days would be like, "What? This is you," or lock them up, right? Things have really changed.
We just have time for one more. Oh, Lee Dyer. Oh, take your time. We got several minutes.
No, this isn't. I have so many memories, so I was trying to think, like, what's the one that stands out the most? So I'm just going to, like, give a whole bunch of little snapshots. Yay. Do you remember so when we were Flames, we would be put on to crews, like work crews. And you would get, like, water. And you'd have to carry the jugs of water down to the water house, fill them up, and carry them back. And then go back down, get more water, and come back. Not the job you really wanted. The other thing, do you remember when we were Flames, how the kitchen was set up, and we would eat first? And I don't remember what time we get up. It felt like 4. All right, 6. It was early. And we would cram into where the salad bar is parked. The front kitchen, we would all sit in there and eat, and then every meal would be early. And that's actually one of my favorite parts, because we didn't eat with the general camp, but we bonded in there, which was really cool. I remember the dancers in Chalmers Lodge. And do you remember we had the record player, and all the records that went around? And then one of the work crews that I was put on as a Flame was washing pots and pans, which was my second worst favorite job. Getting water was my first. And I was assigned this one time with this one person who drove me insane, because they had a way of doing it, which was not the way I did it. I just wanted to get through it, and I would just do it. And they would they would stack them up and organize them. So I would eat as fast as I could, and I'm not a fast eater, and this person ate so fast that it was insane. And we would race back to see who was going to get there first, because whoever got there first got to do it their way. I married that man. So, yes, we still do. And then I have to say, my last favorite memory is, obviously my husband is from here, but some of my very best friends from my whole life are from here. So it's really a nice, magical place. Lots of memories.
And that's a wonderful end to our event tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Happy birthday to the FNCA, and bless you all.